Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. The plain truth about common sense is that it is neither common nor sense. I'm Jan Roberts from South Africa, and I'm continuing my series on self-care, and as you might have guessed by now, it's going to be about common sense. Now, common sense is the knack of seeing things as they are and doing things as they ought to be done. That's a quote by a guy called C.E. Stowe, which I found quite interesting, and that's why I'm using it. But what is common sense really? It's actually sound logic, it's practical sense, it's good reasoning that is searching for a simple but very effective and useful way to accomplish things. Some things are just obvious. We all know that if you walk in the rain without an umbrella, you are going to get wet. Now, this is common sense. It's information that we all commonly share, and it's the way we were taught to do things, simply using our head. Practicing common sense is like building muscle. The more we use it, the stronger our minds become. We all might know some people whose muscles in that area are maybe a little bit flabby, to say the least, or even non-existent altogether. Maybe even the person looking in the mirror every single day. Common sense, defined as sound judgment derived from experience rather than study, evokes images of people who are seen as reasonable, down to earth, reliable, and indeed practical. But there's the catch. Common sense is neither common nor sense, so there is not a whole lot of sound judgment going on these days. Has there ever been? So it's not common. If common sense was common, then most people wouldn't make the kinds of decisions they do every day. People wouldn't do, people would actually buy stuff that they can't afford. They wouldn't smoke. They wouldn't eat junk food. They wouldn't gamble. Okay, I know everything in moderation, but generally speaking, people wouldn't do the multitude of things that are clearly not good for them. And there are so many of these kind of things, like I talked in many of the self-care sessions already. It's about eating habits and about exercise and about sleeping and about me time and about mindfulness. So many things. You can go back and watch them all. And common sense isn't real sense as we define sense as being sound judgment, because relying on experience alone doesn't usually offer enough information to draw reliable conclusions. Real sense can rarely be derived from experience alone, because most people's experiences are somewhat limited. Now, if you look at our elected representatives, for example, though I can't vouch for how representative they actually are, especially at this moment, that's a whole different debate, but I think it's safe to say that unsound judgment, that is in the absence of common sense, does not discriminate at all based on political affiliation or ideologies. And we'll leave it at that. But you can have a look into that if you haven't seen this happening yet. But there was an interesting survey done a few years ago in the UK about common sense, and the following interesting statistics came up. And I'm going to read that for you. 79% of Brits value common sense over a high IQ. Well, there's another reasons why they might. While 70% believe that having common sense is more important than having a degree. Now, that's also a point of interest between being streetwise and being academically wise, if you like. There's a title for that, but I don't know. Now, there was another. 69% of Brits wouldn't hire someone who didn't have common sense. 30% of Brits admitted to having witnessed a colleague being held back at work thanks to the lack of common sense, and a fifth of workers say up to 4 hours of their working week is disrupted by mistakes made by colleagues with a lack of common sense. Now, the health benefits, I'll give you one more. Over 2/3, that's 68% of Brits believe common sense is more important in a potential partner than good looks. And 48% of Brits would rather date someone who lacked in common sense, and 20% have dumped a romantic partner due to their lack of common sense. So if you look at all those kind of stats, and okay, I know they're statistics, but how do you think all that affects common sense? How do you think all that affects our lives? You know, the stress that goes with it, the lack of common sense and the frustrations and all the other kind of things. And common sense it actually does make some sense most of the time. Now, when our partner doesn't have common sense, it can make us feel like their mother or carer, or their father for that matter, constantly having to remind them to do things that most people would do with ease. Put the bins out, lock the door, turn the oven off. You know, all those kind of, the list goes on and on. But these people often fail to turn up on time and do the things we want. We can train them, but it's an uphill struggle. And parents can help their children to learn common sense at a very early age. So it's something that can be learned. That's a good thing. You know, I talk about it very often, and it amazes me many times when things that seem like common sense, other people just don't see. And I know that happens, of course, and I know also why it happens, but it does happen. And if you have it happening in your life, how much does it frustrate you? How much does it make you angry? How much does it make you get you upset because things that should just happen without you having to tell, that is actually common sense to you, and it doesn't happen? It's not the biggest point in self-care, but it's something to. It's yet another point that I found. I thought, hey, I can do a little talk about it, and there is actually some benefits in common sense, and I'll give you just a couple of them. One of the benefits is that you will be trusted and valued as a practical person and a good decision maker. Another one is you will experience positive outcome from seeing things as they are and doing things as they ought to be done. Now, I might as well give you a few steps to develop common sense as well. And one of them is very simple. Think twice before you act. Now, there's a novelty for some people. This gives you common sense and opportunity to speak into you. Now, stay in touch with reality, at least sometime. Discuss your thoughts and ideas with others whose common sense you respect to make sure you are keeping things in perspective. This will bring balance in your thinking. Now, that's very healthy for you. And the last one I want to leave you with is do what you know is right. Do the right things rather than the things that are acceptable. And that was by a quote by a managerial genius called Peter Drucker. So, you know, do the right things rather than the things that are acceptable. I mean, that's something to think about. But the bottom line is that if we can learn to think in more open and rigorous ways, we can draw the most accurate conclusions and make the best decisions possible in the myriad of questions, concerns and problems we face every single day. Be they mundane or impactful, but as we might just all get along a little bit better too. Common sense is always good for your health. I wish you a great evening, and I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.